It's a pleasure to talk about Western Alaska. This story came to Crescat's attention to my attention about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, while it was a private company, and it really caught my attention around the large scale potential. Even though this is Western Alaska, a bit remote, you got to go look for big prizes in this country. And this one with the gigantic CRD potential, as well as the likely porphyry driver that's lurking somewhere in here, skarn potential, you name it. I mean, this thing's got basically the entire picture from the porphyry outwards to skarn, CRD, and then even the distal disseminated type deposits. It's an exceptional opportunity, as I see it, early stage in some ways, but advanced stage in others. There is historic mining on the property. I think Joe and Kik can elaborate a bit about that, but it's really that exploration upside that I found intriguing. The CRD potential in particular is absolutely remarkable. Last year, about middle of the year, the company drilled an amazing drill hole in the sulfide part of the CRD system. In other words, they drilled a bit deeper down dip along an existing CRD that was known, and they got into the sulfide mineralization. And the rock was absolutely solid metal. The core that came out of the ground was just full of zinc and lead and silver. It was some of the highest grade CRD I think I've ever seen anywhere of any project. It's graded somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% combined zinc lead and somewhere around 500 or 600 grams per ton silver. It was about 9 meter, I think, downhole width, which translates to maybe 8 meter true width. But when you start thinking about the dollar value of rock like that, it's just insane. I mean, you can take and CRDs, by the way, these manto shapes, they can go on and on. They can basically replace a bed of limestone or some type of favorable rock. They can go on for many hectares, even kilometers in some cases. The big CRD systems in Mexico, I think some of them have footprints that exceed maybe 5 or 6 kilometers across. So these things can be enormous. You start doing a little math and apply density probably around 4.5 or 5. You get say 100 by 100, so 1 hectare times 8 meters thick times density on the order of 4.5 or 5. You're looking at a few 100,000 tons, 400,000 or 500,000 tons, I think, if I do it right in my head. And then at these grades, I mean, this is effectively about 0.8 ounce per ton gold ore or something like this. It's absolutely insane. Big system, good team, and they're going to find something really big this year.
Okay. Hey, well, thanks for the introduction, Quinton. And that's I like the way you described the deposit and also the fact that it's a new exploration in a district that's been around about 40 years. So, Quinton, I'll give you just a real quick snapshot of my background. Some of it, but started out as an economic geologist and working out of Tucson and Mexico with Pinoles doing my thesis, but moved early on to Alaska with Anaconda as Alaska was opening up right during the construction of the Alaska pipeline. So very exciting time. Did a little bit of work with Watts Griffith McEwitt right prior to starting with Anaconda. Was very fortunate to be on the team that discovered Greens Creek. Got to watch the first discovery drill hole there and actually signed a few of the early claims on the Big Sore. So, but spent really a lot of time with Anaconda, working all over the state, from southeast to interior, all the way down to Alaska Peninsula, et cetera, but focused primarily on the Ambler District in the Brooks Range. That's now called the project that South 32 and Trilogy is a joint venture that includes bornite and the Arctic deposit and all the other things around with that. But more important for this discussion, Anaconda opened a joint venture with Cook Inlet Region, the largest Alaska Native corporations, to explore all over Alaska. And one of those teams in 1980 made the grassroots discoveries that now comprise the Illinois Creek District. And then I was able to be the first project geologist to run that for Anaconda. So very exciting times, a lot of discoveries. All of these really were true grassroots discoveries that Anaconda found, worked up, drilled a lot of them. And then important to Joe and I, the company closed or was closed by its parent, Arco Atlantic Richfield, in 1985, in one of the many downturns in the oil and gas business. So that allowed us to end up with what we have today. But do want to point out that some of these Illinois Creek, the Round Top Porphyry, the Honker high-grade gold vein, and really the last project that Anaconda was focused on drilling was Water Pump Creek. And 2 or 3 of the original sulfide hits in that were done by Nate Brewer, a longtime friend and geologist who's currently a director, and had some spectacular discoveries. And then before they could do another field season, Anaconda was closed by its parent company. So a lot of opportunity left, and we're really excited about it. Joe has come up with some very good plans and has some good ideas and comments on it. Joe?
I'm Joe Piekenbrock. I'm the Chief Exploration Officer, and like everybody on the screen here, a lot of exploration experience over the last 30 or 40 years. Largely, my experience has been in Alaska, but there's been a fair portion of it in South America and Central America as well. Really started off with Cominco early days, big reconnaissance programs in Western Alaska. Very successful kind of strategy for where the market was at that point. Big early stage terrain looks. Real happy to be a part of the original Pebble discovery team that found Pebble. Really one of the better, one of the bigger metal resources in the world right now. Then went to South America kind of as a technical guru for Placer, part of a bunch of acquisitions there. Zaldivar, eventually owned by Barrick after Barrick took out Placer Dome. Spent 4 or 5 years there, really getting a real look at high sulfidation systems and kind of working Brazil, Peru, Argentina, the whole terrain. Came back and started a couple of juniors, really left the major space, started the juniors. Quinton, you can appreciate that with your years at Newmont as well, just that transition, probably kind of similar careers and timing at that point. Saw the opportunity of moving into the junior space and really exploring on my own. Started Brett Resources with Larry Nagy, Ron Nedolitsky, a pretty good discovery, or pretty good ultimate buyout, ending up in a Cisco. Moved on from that, really burdened by the Bre-X timing and money. So joined Rick Van Nieuwenhuis. He had just acquired Nova Gold, and we had worked together previously in Placer Dome, had a long history together. I became kind of his VP of exploration. We acquired Donlin. At that point, we'd both been on the property earlier and recommended it into Placer when they acquired it. Was really a complicated deposit at that point, not really well understood. I really just parked myself in the core for 18 months, and there was 100 kilometers of drilling. Really put together a new interpretive model. Ultimately drove the resource from 5 or 6 million ounces when we acquired it to 38 million and a lot of upside. I mean, it's still one of the great ore deposits on Earth. Won the Thayer Lindsley Award for that along with Rick. We also started to grow Nova at the time, picked up a lot of assets, picked up the Arctic deposit in Galore Creek, advanced those really quickly. Galore Creek really grew in those few years, kind of quadrupled the existing resource, realized it was nested porphyries. Turned that in, ultimately launching the Barrick takeover. Once they had acquired Placer Dome, they really realized the value of Donlin Creek and that it was going to be a lot more than the 38 million ounces ultimately down the line. The copper assets, principally Arctic and Bornite, started really focusing on Bornite. Again, quickly led to this discovery of the South Zone, really some incredible grades. I think our first hole in it was 180 meters of 4% copper. Super success, won the Colin Spence Award for that. Stepped away from them in about 2015. Like Kit, I've been a long time in Alaska, so I appreciated that there are real tipping points in projects where there's enough data to think. So I'd been out to look at Illinois Creek as it was being reclaimed as a gold asset. It had caught the real downturn before 2000. The project had failed, realized it was a really incredible system. So I staked that part of it on my own and just always kept it in my back pocket as a really great story. You know, my whole career has not been kind of a portfolio explorer. I'm a real believer in finding really good big projects on every 4 or 5 years, ones that aren't well understood, but there's enough data to think on. So this was a perfect example of that. 500 plus drill holes when I staked it totally open, sat on it for almost 10, 12 years at least before really started looking to do something with it. Was really distracted by my time at Nova. I knew Kit was working there, saw his assets else in the district, and then really came to the conclusion that this would be a great time. I'd stepped away from Nova Copper to start a new junior. So Kit and I consolidated the companies over the last few years, really captured the whole district, the potential of it. And now we're at that point where we really have this huge data set, just making huge headway on reinterpreting it. Lots of new understanding of Western Alaska, the tectonics. Started to build out a really good technical team, hired a really good structural geologist coming out of Colorado School of Mines just here recently. Really is helping us resolve the kind of thrust dynamics that is working in the belt here. Very much like the Mexican CRD belt, geologically incredibly similar. That is really leading us to all kinds of new targeting. You know, this last year was our really first year to drill at Illinois Creek itself. Did the kind of scattered drilling at a lot of the different targets, realized the real significance of Water Pump Creek. It had been kind of underplayed in some of the Anaconda reports. They knew exactly what it was, such, but that had never really been telegraphed because they were closing at that point. The data just sat there stagnant for a long time. In the meantime, the whole oxide gold thing had become the story. Everybody looked at that as a failed mine. They just didn't appreciate it. This is a huge, huge CRD system, ripe at the point with lots of data, lots of information, geophysics to really make a change. So that's really been what this year has been, you know, doing some tests to really redefine the geologic model and to see real potential in these targets. And I mean, the great thing is drilling Water Pump Creek 2109. like you said, Quinton, you don't see metal like that very often. So
no, you don't. Look, actually, on that note, what's the plan? Like, how many meters, how many holes, how big of a footprint are you going to try to drill?
Well, you know, the immediate Water Pump Creek, I mean, it's such high grade. Of course, we're just going to offset and start building tons. You know, to get to a 95 to 100 million ounce resource, we really only have to expand that sulfide footprint to kind of 200 meters by 300 meters. So super right. But the whole CRD system it's 5.5 kilometers to the southwest to the existing Illinois Creek pit where the old oxide gold resource will. But, you know, we did an extensive soil sampling this year. We've now pushed a really distinct copper gold anomaly striking out of the pit in a direction that had never been explored before to the south. That's over a 1.5 kilometer length now, totally open. We did have a hole close to the pit there. I hit a pretty good kind of 10-meter Gaussian. Not a lot of copper and a little bit of gold, lots of tungsten. Clearly, we're heading back toward the porphyry that direction. The vectoring is just fantastic. You know, understanding all the different plates in the structural makeup, we're just starting to model that now that we, you know, have a pretty good geochemist and I have a pretty good structural guy. Bringing all those models together is my big thing over the next month or two. We have about 6,000 meters planned for this year. Obviously, we're going to step off on Water Pump Creek and just add resource.
Yeah.
But with some of that drilling, I just need to drill first holes in a bunch of these other targets. So it's the balance of that. You know, we have two rigs on site already. I don't know, Kit, you could maybe talk a little bit more about the plan.
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. We are going to be doing some early geophysics to try to get a little deeper look at things. But it's, I think it's very important also, Quinton, moving more to the valuation standpoint of Western Alaska Minerals, for everyone to realize when we made the decision to go public about a year ago and went through everything, the qualifying property was the Illinois Creek oxide gold. That has our existing 43101 resource, 525,000 ounces of gold equivalent. Agenta's Capital is our financial advisor, and all the models they did. That's how we came up with the valuation of going public, which we started out in the 30 million Canadian range. That did not include anything for Water Pump Creek, nothing for the Honker HighGrade Gold, nothing for the Round Top Porphyry and the associated really untested CRD system adjacent to that. So that there really is a lot of potential for the company to move ahead as these things are recognized. As Joe mentioned, this year we'll clearly focus on developing some tonnage and hopefully having a resource at the end of the season in 2022 at Water Pump Creek, so we can bring that out and have a small, you know, whatever the footprint we're able to drill. We do have 3 company-owned drill rigs on site, so we believe in owning our own equipment, so we don't have to go out bidding for it in what may be a tough market to find drills and drillers this year. So really excited about that. Joe's team has got a tremendous story, and I think I really look forward to those first half dozen drill holes at Water Pump Creek. And if we hit a couple of those, we need to have you come on site and pick up the core in person, Quinton.
I will try my best to lift it. Given that it's solid metal, that might be a little tough, but I would like to have the opportunity to at least try.
Well, it's one of those great years. It's just when you know, all of these projects, there's a point where there's all this noise that doesn't quite make sense. And as you get better and better in the model, things start to make sense. And suddenly it becomes predictive, and your drilling costs plunge because you're being so successful in your drilling. And it's right at that tipping point. I mean,
well, on that note, I mean, you guys, I would say, given what we're seeing already at Water Pump Creek, I would say that odds are you're going to rapidly expand this thing. In fact, I would say even, you know, what you described earlier, maybe 200 by 300 meters, that will just be a beginning to the system, is my bet. What happens if you are just absolutely wildly successful here? How aggressive can you go? We're entering a bull market. I think everybody that is in the precious metal space, you know, fully senses that we've broken out, and gold and silver are basically back in vogue, and I think they will be for a few years. And you know, I look at a project like this, remote Alaska. It has been sitting there for quite some time, and you know, life is short for all of us. So how do you move this thing forward aggressively?
Well, you know, the good thing is we have pretty good infrastructure around. You know, it's road accessible. So, you know, that side of it, it's pretty easy. We have a herc strip there. It's easy to mobilize and scale things up. You know, you've seen a bunch of these projects develop. You know, it's the classic doubling. You know, you got 2 rigs going, then it's 4 rigs, then it's 8 rigs. I mean, I think we had 16 at the peak at Donlin, and I think I had 12 at Delore at a point. So it's just that ramp up. You know, it's it's challenging always, because it's hard to, you know, it's hard to bring real talent in, but a real discovery talent wants to be there. You know, I look at my Donlin, you know, we were very early, just as the market started to change in 2001 to kind of 2002. So we were kind of ahead. There was a lot of unemployed, really top-notch people out there. So I was able to build a team out pretty quickly that way.
Hmm.
You know, like everything, it's a seasonal environment, so it's pushing those shoulders. I mean,
Yep.
Illinois Creek worked fine as a mine year round. We can make it that way. It's just a cost of raising money to do that. You know, we have a lot of experience in Alaska. I've seen huge camps built up. You know, it's you know, it's kind of a unique environment to work in that way, but it's a very close-knit community, and you know who can do things in those sorts of communities.
Mhm.
You know, the good thing, this isn't a severe terrain. It's not like Galore Creek was in 30 feet of snow every year. You get over those kinds of challenges. Kit, you've seen a lot of this as well. You know, you ran big camp as a camp manager, the senior guy for a lot of years.
Quinton, I think as Joe mentioned, we do have some very good infrastructure. This was a open pit operating heap leach gold mine. So the first one in Alaska, just prior to Kinross Fort Knox. So it wasn't very big. It didn't last very long, but we do have we purchased the year-round man camp from Nova Gold.
Mhm.
They left quite a bit of heavy equipment to maintain things. So we have our own graders and D6 and a fleet of beautiful 1996 Ford pickup trucks that we're currently replacing with some new steeds. But as far as ramping up, last year, we really wanted to expand the drilling. We brought in a C-130 Hercules and one load, had a brand new drill rig, new pickup trucks, Bobcat, probably 5 different pieces of equipment. So it's not cheap, but it happens in about an hour and a half. So you don't spend a lot of time and effort on other logistics. So we can do that again and bring in some more drill rigs towards the end of the season if we're as successful as we all think we will be. But
I'm going to make a prediction. You are going to be that successful. This is one of the most extraordinary CRD systems I've ever seen. I mean, you look at the metal grades in this thing, the zinc and the lead and the silver, even just individually, and you look at where they fall with respect to other CRDs around the world. These things are probably in the upper 1 percentile in terms of grade of all of those systems. Okay, and in my book, when you see grades like that, you always got to take note. I mean, obviously economically, it's very, very important, but it also can provide you an indication of the strength of the system. And I think bigger systems, bigger, stronger systems usually generate grades like this. So I have a feeling you're going to be incredibly successful. And in about 6 to 12 months from now, we will be talking about how you're going to be ramping up.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
It's the same criteria Quinton and I always look at is, you have to have scale of a system. This has a fluid footprint that's 8-9 kilometers on a side, and it's not closed off on the other side necessarily. Okay. It's still open, how explorable it is, but it has a huge footprint. And then you actually see the depositional mechanism that makes that sort of grade. Last year we were focused on the oxide, and this oxidized cap of this gold copper part, this structural zone, it isn't even part of the mantos. And of course, it's 1.5 grams oxide gold equivalent. That's a really good oxide gold number, but it isn't like screaming grade that's going to, push you over the top. At Water Pump Creek, we are so leveraged to high grade. It totally changes the scenario. It's how we fundamentally changed as a company by drilling that hole and appreciating what those 3 or 4 other earlier ones were. I'm as jazzed as you are.
Well, good. So about the porphyry, so you say you're seeing some pretty good indications that this copper or gold area that you mentioned earlier is actually helping you vector in on that porphyry. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that? What are you seeing, and then what do you think? How do you think that's going to play into your exploration plans? I mean, it's one thing to find very high grade CRD, but could there be another, pebble or something like that here?
Well, CRDs as a whole, they're productive and non-productive ones. Some of them, look at resolution. I mean, it sits in a classic CRD belt. Somebody just finally drilled the porphyry. It's why I always loved it. When when I looked at the district, I always looked up at Round Top and said, oh, it's a copper silver moly system, but there's all this gold down here at Illinois Creek. It's going to be a copper gold system. We got to be focusing on the porphyry. One of the reasons I really started to look at merging with KIT is that I had a big mag anomaly about 3 or 4 or 5 kilometers clear out to the west. Okay. And it's like, I wanted to drill this, and it's like, let's put the projects together, because they didn't have any real access to capital, and KIT was doing really well with Round Top. And it's like, well, we'll just take the drill rig and we'll just poke a little hole in the mag anomaly and see what it was. Well, we did that. We just drilled a short hole in it, and it was one of these Jurassic mafic intrusions. It wasn't what we were targeting on. But the reason I was so focused is the zonation in the district is profound. It's copper gold all over on one side, a little bit of zinc with it, a very little lesser lead. And as you move across, it becomes kind of classic porphyry, chloride complex zonation, clear out to the lead, zinc, silver. And it's like, this is great. There's going to be a big copper gold porphyry sitting out here at some point. So, we did that. Then this year, we kind of waited around for the gold and silver market to come back as a whole, and then, completed the deal. Then really looked at Water Pump Creek this year, and yeah, there was a historical resource in an old Anaconda report. It was just it was actually a sectional resource. It said there was 100,000 tons of this high grade there. Well, I looked at it, and the sectional resource was based on a panel 15 meters wide, with some of the drilling just projected on it. And it's like, this is, and then I went back and looked at it. It was like, whoa, there's far more scale here. So this year we came in and actually demonstrated that scale in the oxide portion, 200 by 400 meters. And then those few historical sulfide holes underneath it, which were, we're on a par with what we drilled in 2109, and then drilled one down dip to see how much potential there was. And you can just see how the pieces start falling into place from a story that was always about just this Gaussian with low grade gold, and no one looking at that other opportunity around it. So
interesting. So back to the porphyry, like what might people expect here? Like, looking at this porphyry in context of many other systems regionally in Alaska, does this match, for example, the Pebble system or other analogs? What can you say about that?
We only see a few thin little porphyry dikes, hardly any. Okay.
Interesting.
We do see one of the plates has some skarn mineralization in it.
Okay.
But it's only in one historical hole, and it's, you're reading a lot between not having enough data, access to understanding that data.
Yeah.
It has classic kind of porphyry zonation from the chloride complex, but we're not in the porphyry part of the system that we're seeing the zonation like we see up at Round Top. And Round Top is a real high level porphyry. There's a lithocap, covellite, chalcocite in the late D veins.
Is that right?
Very, very few C veins. And then a deep target. We drilled a couple of holes on the deeper potential, drilled into a moly part of the system, really high grade moly, kind of classic B veins, moly on the walls. There's a big mag susceptibility anomaly that's off to the north under the target. We see some structural zones of kind of classic biotite magnetite coming out. So there's a really good porphyry target there in kind of a classic porphyry sense. Illinois Creek, that whole part of the system just goes undercover there. Nobody's done any work on it. We've pushed the soils down there to as far as we can, and then it's just going out undercover.
Is that right?
No
Okay, so what's the cover there? What kind of cover do you have?
It's not very extensive. It's moving down toward a big flat river plain.
Okay. Yeah.
So the opportunity to look in that direction. We drilled 2 holes south of the pit this year, about 100 meters south of the pit because we could tell there was some sort of cross structure coming. Now our soil's saying that's a huge anomaly, and it's 1.5 kilometers further to the south.
That's
So
very
my
interesting.
first thing is just to go drill a hole there.
It sounds like it. Look, that's impressive. Is there any geophysics that covers that area? Is there anything else you can use?
There isn't, you know, there's some good gravity. Okay. There was the first gravity, you know, there's a few layers of geophysics. The first, there was some gravity. The first was a helicopter supported gravity survey that Anaconda did in 1983. Okay. And it was mainly, you know, they had the Gossan at Illinois Creek and they scattered around. And, you know, it really showed the Dolomites at Water Pump Creek and all of that really, really well. But it had a real low under Illinois Creek, kind of like you would from a big light Pluton sitting there.
Sure.
And then there's a very discrete northeast, just north trending zone coming off of that low that's even lower. And that's this structural zone coming out of the pit.
Yeah, interesting.
And it doesn't, it only goes about 600 or 700 meters and then it stops. But then there's some big greenstones that we've been able to map in the magnetics. Okay. And that's coming across, and we think that's potentially another cap on the intrusive. It really looks that way back over toward Last Hurrah and those other targets we kind of talked about last week when I spoke with you. So just getting all these pieces together is really where we're at, you know, and things like that didn't make sense. It's like, that's really making sense now, you know.
That's remarkable. Look, you know, sometimes these stories, everybody thinks exploration is just a matter of, you know, getting a little geochemistry or something and then going out and spinning a drill around until you hit something. But it's actually more involved in that. You kind of got to do forensics basically on, you know, a process that took place oftentimes many tens of millions of years ago. And you got to look at little subtle signs quite frequently, you know, about the alteration of the rock, how the rock's been affected by heat, by water, by, you know, other processes. And you got to look at other indications, geophysical, geochemical, and put all that together and try to, you know, guide your exploration program. But it is not an easy process. Oftentimes it takes dozens of holes before you actually make a discovery hole. But you guys have already made a discovery at Water Pump Creek. There's no question you're onto something big there. It'd be really interesting to see if this copper gold vector that you're seeing leads to a porphyry that might be actually the causative porphyry, the porphyry that drove this system.
Yeah. You know, for me, it's always, you know, I've made my whole career on all these kind of projects that have significant drilling in them, and it's just building that coherent story, and everything has to fit. It's the lithology, stratigraphy, the geochemical signature, the geophysical, the structural fluid plumbing thing. And, you know, as you get better and better on all of those things, you really understand how it works, and then you can be effective. And that's the tipping point I try to tell everybody about.
It's
Very well put.
It is a good story, Quinton. So I thank you for wanting to talk about it. We didn't even touch on Hunker, the high-grade gold up to the north, which
Touch on it. Let's hear a little bit. Let's not leave people hanging.
Okay, I didn't know if you wanted to save that for later, but it is a very high-grade gold vein. Again, Anaconda discovery, a lot of surface sampling and channel sampling on the surface with grades of 5 to as much as everything was ounces per ton in those days, so about 45 grams of gold. And we drilled 6 holes in it this year, the first time since the discovery drilling in 1982, again by Nate Brewer. And Joe's team had 3 drill hole intercepts, good ones in the vein, and the best one was drill hole 6. And with all the slow assays, those are finally coming in, and we'll have a composite compiled here in the next week or two and have some numbers there. But that will be something, it'll have to take a second seat to Water Pump Creek. But as we get more time and money and drilling, that's something that will add some very high grade oxide gold to the Illinois Creek story, and ultimately be a sort of a joint feed of heap leach, agitated leach And we'll focus on much better recoveries. We've got some good metallurgy that's going there.
So can you put the high-grade gold in context of, the rest of the system? I mean, how does this gold system relate to everything to the south there? Is this part of the system, or is it a separate system? What type of vein is it? Epithermal, mesothermal? How did it form?
So, again, to put it in context, it's been age dated. It's exactly the same timing as the Illinois Creek system, is the Coteau Pluton, which is just immediately north of it. So clearly it's a whole temporal event of magmatism. It just ends on when it happens, when all the thrust belt ends and there's a relaxation event and there's intrusives in place that are very fluid rich. And that's where all these systems are coming out. They're part and parcel of the same temporal magmatic event. Whether they're part of the same system or not, I can't say 100%, but it's only 5 or 6 kilometers away to the north. So it's likely the same event, same kind of orientation of the kind of tensional structures. To me, we've seen a little tenantite in the little remnant tenantite in it, and some remnant arsenopyrite. To me, it looks like a intermediate sulfidation vein system. Again, could go right back to the Mexican analogs. If you're putting these fluids into a nice carbonate that you can beat away out and deposit a manto, it's the same fluids, but they're in a structural zone. It's in kind of phyllitic hornfels rocks up there, not reactive the same way. So we're getting the same fluid deposition in the structural side. Those tend to be pretty good vertical reliefs on them. We've chased it about 1 kilometer on the surface with really good soil sampling, seeing it a swarm of veins. Again, it's just opportunistic upside. If you look at Mexico right now, they're not really chasing the CRDs anymore because they've been mined out. They're chasing all the peripheral vein systems now. That's what the Vislas are. That's what Silvercrest is. They're chasing the vein systems in the same belt, same metallurgy.
Sure, same processes that form the CRDs, but different host rocks and therefore different kind of deposits, veins instead
different
of
depositional controls. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Look, that's very exciting. Look, I think to be in Alaska, you got to look for something big, and this story is absolutely huge. High grade, high margin is going to be everything in this part of the world. But I think this is an absolutely killer story. It's one of our largest holdings at Crescat. We've definitely, we got in early. Fortunately, when the company was pre-IPO, we got in on the IPO round as well. And we are absolutely just riveted to see how this exploration pans out this coming drill season. I think this is going to be one of the most exciting stories for me to talk about over the next few months. Absolute delight to catch up with you both.
Yeah. Well, we really do need to get you up to the project. You'd enjoy it.
I will do that. I've already booked my ticket to Fairbanks.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot, Quinton. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thanks much. Take care.